Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jew Folk. This week I talked to Tommy Hoffman, the new executive director of Herzl Camp. We talk about how working at camp decades ago changed his life, why now is the time to move to a nonprofit, and looking for purpose-driven work on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Tommy, this episode is brought to you by Ethan Roberts and Ethan Roberts Photography. If you read any of TC Jew Folk's coverage from earlier this year when we went to Israel, it was likely accompanied by a photo that Ethan took. He was a Minnesota State Fair Fine Arts Competition finalist, but he also shoots weddings, families, events, and parties, in addition to bar and bat mitzvahs and senior photos, including my own child's senior photos. They were outstanding and looked just how she hoped they would. I am a paying customer and could not recommend Ethan's work highly enough. See more of his work at ethanrobertsphotos.com. Also, this is going to be our last episode for 2023. So before signing off, I wanted to thank everyone for downloading, listening, subscribing, and sharing the show. And if you haven't yet, it is not too late for you to do that. But from the entire Jew Folk team, my heartfelt thanks to all of you who have interacted with TC Jew Folk this year. We're going to take a couple of weeks off the pod, and we will be back on January 8th. But until then, Tommy Hoffman, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
So excited. I have been eagerly anticipating this day.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You are the new executive director of Herzl Camp. Mazel tov to you on this new job. This is fantastic.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I guess for starters, what is it about Herzl that made this time, either in your life or your career, whatever, and the place, the moment for you to do this?
Well,
I know there's a lot of things.
There's no quick answer to that question, but it's a great question. Why Herzl? Why now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, most of my identity is wrapped up in Herzl Camp.
Really?
My Jewish identity. There's a member of the community. I don't want to name.
That's fine.
Drop names because that wouldn't be appropriate. But there's a member of the community who reminds me every time I see him that I made a comment to him way back in the day. I don't want to give years because then it reveals how old I am. 54.
Okay.
But there was a guy way back in the day that I said in 1989-ish maybe, at an oneg, I said, I came to Herzl Camp a Jew, and I left Herzl Camp that summer Jewish. And so Herzl Camp for me has always been that pillar.
Okay.
And it has gifted me a Jewish identity that I'm very proud of. I never went there as a summer camper. I didn't go there. I worked there in 1988. That was the first time I ever drove across the threshold, was with my friend EJ. And two of us had never been there before, and we didn't even know what we had signed up for. And it changed both of our lives immensely.
Yes.
So that's why Herzl Camp. I'll just leave it there because it gets rooted all the way through.
Okay, so before you get to the next part, I'm curious, though.
You may have to remind me what the next part is, but go ahead.
No, that's fine. I may have to remind me too. Having never been there, obviously, you're from the Twin Cities. You're certainly aware of Herzl.
Oh, sure.
What was it about that? I guess going back to 1988, thinking about that time in your life, that was the moment that you decided to make the leap.
So that's a great question. I was a diver. Yes, I wore Speedos, but I started diving when I was quite young.
Okay.
And it was a big part of my life. Mm-hmm. It was my whole summer was all about diving. 2-a-days, coaches' houses. I mean, everything I did was dive. And it was a very big part of my life. When I went to the University of Minnesota to dive, I had redshirt my freshman year. And that was whatever, won't go into that story. But, and then I joined Sigma Alpha Mu because I had a lot of free time. Okay. Probably not, in a lot of cases, the greatest decision I ever made. In a lot of cases, probably not the best decision I ever made. But that's how it all started. And I remember sitting around the house one night saying, I don't know what I'm going to do this summer because I think I'm done diving. And my buddy said, well, you should come work at Herzl Camp. And I knew, obviously, I'm a Twin Cities Jew, so I knew what Herzl Camp was, and I had friends that had gone there and spoke highly of it. But they were kind of, because of my intensity around diving, they were peripheral friends of mine at the time. Sure. So I never really experienced USY as a kid. I was a Temple Israel Jew and still am, and proudly. But I didn't do all of these other youth activities as a kid because I was so ingrained in the diving community. So that's what led me down the Herzl role.
Sport. I mean, it's interesting. Sports was so all consuming. Like you get to a certain level. Like if you're going to go ahead and dive in college, sports is going to be all consuming. It's that's how it goes.
Well, and then you take it to today's kid, as we were just talking ahead of this recording about my son. Right, his goal in life was to play college golf. That was it. His head was down. I'm going to play college golf. It's going to happen. Obviously, mom and dad say, well, you're going to do that with a good education, and you're going to get good grades, and you're going to be
right.
We're going to instill our values.
Absolutely.
Right? But it is, in today's world, those kids, I mean, that's their life. Yeah. And if you're going a Division I athlete today, it's different than it was in the 80s.
Totally.
It was intense, but not even close to what it looks like today. You don't get to, you want to be an electrical engineering major in college and you want to play a sport, your coach is going to say, sorry, you're in anthropology and nothing else.
That's right.
And because your job here is to play your sport. Right. And that's not our son, but that does exist.
That's a lot of places, yeah.
And you wrestle with that. Like, how is this going to look and how does that translate into the summer camping experience, right? Let's bring it back to Herzl.
Absolutely.
And what's ahead of us is, what does that look like? How can you be that to that kid and give this great social summer value-based, driven, instilled experience to that kid? And can you do both? Is it possible? I don't know the answer. I hope I find it.
Fascinating question, though. And I think that is interesting because I know plenty of parents who are friends with who wrestle with the kid as a, not necessarily D1 quality, but like competitive athlete. And there's a soccer tournament.
Every parent thinks their kid's D1 for the most part if their kid's good at something.
That's probably fair.
Right? And and I've learned that. I'm guilty of it.
Yeah.
I thought my kid, oh my gosh, he's going to go play at I'm not going to say Harvard or Penn or MIT, but
it's probably for the best right now.
Yeah, too soon. But you think that. I mean, that's
for sure.
That's
for sure.
And because you believe in your kid.
Absolutely.
And you want to believe. And a lot of parents. My son was a hockey player. Minnesota hockey players. A lot of parents that they're living through their kid.
Oh, no question.
And they're trying to repair their mistakes through their kid. And that's obviously a different psychology conversation for a different day. But
yes,
if your kid wants to play softball in high school and the tryouts happen to be at the end of the school year, beginning of the summer for the next year, and they're going to make those decisions, it's the intensity of that is hard to fight.
And I think that's something as you grow into the role, you're going to have to sort of wrestle with the calls from parents of, I need my kid to come home from camp for 3 days in the middle of some week because of a tryout or a tournament. I mean, that's something that's probably, it's a phone call you're going to have to get at some point.
Well, note that I haven't even had my first day yet on the job, so
that's true. We are recording this. All right, let people in behind the curtain a little bit. We are recording this before you have technically been in the office to start. At some point, however,
that's okay. But I'm sure. But that said, and I'll say this 1,000 times, there's a pretty remarkable team in place.
Yes,
and there's some pretty seasoned, experienced veterans with great youth and camping knowledge and great institutional knowledge. And believe me, I will be relying heavily on a fantastic staff and get ready to, put together a dream team.
Absolutely. So, all right. So back to the end of the first question. What was it about coming back to Herzl now at this time in your life and career to do this job?
Yeah, there's a longer answer there. But a lot of things have lined up the right way, okay? Professionally, I've spent 25 years in sales and mostly around real estate and then most recently in real estate finance and complex real estate financing around some specialty conversations specialty products where it took a lot of educating and education. And so the last year of my life specifically was educating. I would go to conferences and I would sit and I would literally hold court and explain what this unique product that we had and these unique structures that we could introduce to the end user. And I kept reminding myself, I would come home, I'd tell my wife, oh, it was a great conference, whatever. I just love it. I love when you can sit and I can try to read the person across the table and say, how do they learn? How do they learn? And it reminded me that I have this muscle that I need to exercise, that I've never exercised. I made a decision in 1990, whatever it was, to not go down the educator's route, to not go down the own a summer camp route.
Okay.
Like I made the decision to go down the professional, go try to make money and wear a suit and
Sure, absolutely.
and and get the cul-de-sac and the house and the stuff. Right. Which can happen both ways, but I made this other directional pivot. My kids are at a different age.
Yeah.
They're my daughter's a sophomore in college. My son's going to be a freshman in college next year. We have had a really nice professional life, filled with some wonderful successes and some very teachable moments. I don't like to say the word failure.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm human, and it goes up and down. Like I'm using hand motions on a podcast. That's funny. And the timing was right. The idea, I have applied for nonprofit leadership roles in the past. I'm obviously, if you know anything about me, I've been involved at Temple Israel. I was lucky enough to be the president of Temple Israel in 2016 to 18, 19, I forget the years. I was very involved at AON, which is an affordable housing organization in Minneapolis. I was on that board for 7 years and very involved in their strategic planning and risk management committees, and saw kind of behind the curtain of what the affordable housing problem that we have in Minnesota.
Sure.
But I've always tried to, not always, in recent years, I have tried to kind of go and exercise this muscle. Yeah. Right? This like nonprofit teacher, whatever that thing that I had in the back of my head.
Right, sure.
And when this opportunity showed itself, there were a couple of different conversations. I had already started applying for some nonprofit leadership roles, which we won't talk about because that's exactly right. And I'd gone down some long roads with some of these organizations. I knew that the executive director opportunity was available at Herzl Camp. There were some people that kept reminding me of that. One in particular, and I love him for it, and I'm really grateful for him for it. But that said, so I started going down this road, and October 7th happened, and I read an article a couple of days later. My dates might be mixed up now, and I don't remember who wrote the article, but it was said we should all be October 8th Jews. And it comes from there's a sign supposedly in the CIA somewhere, reminiscent of 9/11, that was put up on September 12th saying we should all be September 12th Americans. Oh. And this guy wrote an article, and I wish I could remember and quote it exactly, but we should all be October 8th Jews. And October 7th woke a monster that has been around and sleeping by and large for 70, 80 years. And I'm not going to go down that whole rabbit hole because I'm not an academic around it.
Sure,
this is all personal opinion. But my wife and I had a long conversation, and she is amazing and a supportive and loving partner. And I said, I'd like to do this. I said, I want to go and work for the place that try, and if they'll have me, go work for the place that, quite honestly, gave me my Jewish identity. And it was the first place in my life where I truly learned how to be myself. Oh. And I have a lot of life lessons. There is not a job interview. There is not a career discussion around future and idea and thought that I don't refer either outwardly or in my head to my experiences at Herzl Camp. I was the co-head counselor in 1994. Okay. And it was like this great, I refer to it all the time because I learned so much about my abilities. I learned so much about, my ego. And I learned how people work, how people operate, what motivates them. I learned a tremendous amount in 10 weeks in 1994 about life that I have referred to for years and years. And I've stepped on myself and I've made mistakes, but I can always go back to this, like, wait a minute, go back to the origin. Where does it all start? You know, when did you screw up here and how did you fix that?
Right.
How did you own that?
So I think what's really interesting.
So that's why now is the time.
No, and that's perfect. And I think people will have seen as the news comes out about this over the, preceding week, as people are listening to this now. People know you. People know you in the community. They're going to see you and think, this is a really unconventional choice. For you don't have a lot of nonprofit. I mean, you have some board experience, but in terms of staffing, and look, I will fully grant that I'm sure the Temple Israel, being president of the board of Temple Israel, is a level of politics in this community that I'm not really sure I'd want to have that opportunity. But
it was awesome.
I'm sure it was, but like. It was a really interesting time, though, because that was, if I have my dates right in my head, in the middle of either the middle of the strategic planning or the middle of the implementation of that strategic plan. Which,
at Temple?
Yeah.
No, it was the beginning.
It was the beginning.
So
okay.
I was the vice president, and that was I think Roberta was the president at the time, and that was my role, was to lead the strategic planning charge, obviously along with the board. And,
right,
but not lead the charge. That's arrogant to say, but yes, that was a...
Right. So I think that, and that's sort of the thing. That becomes a really, it makes you less unconventional because you do have some of those experiences. I think people looking at the surface will be like, Tommy, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yes. The people who know me well have all had the same response. The ones that I've been able to tell that I was applying, because I was really quiet about this. Because I was applying for other roles that I needed to be.
You got to keep it quiet.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't want to get out ahead of yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I don't want to be out there because if the board or the president decides to go a different route that is in the best interest of the organization, not about me and my ego.
Right. It's fair.
My ego still wants to be protected and say, like, okay, well, he didn't get it. Yeah. Right? Of course. That's just, I'm only human. Right?
Of course.
But that said, the people who know me well and who have heard about this, their response is the opposite. That makes so much sense.
Fascinating.
So I'm very involved in the sober community.
Okay.
And some of my friends, trusted confidants in that world, when I told them about this, they would laugh. Like, well, that just makes the most sense in the world.
That's outstanding. Right? That's great.
No, but it just does. And I'm not so arrogant to think that, wow, this is going to be like perfect, because it's far from that.
Sure, absolutely.
But everything I've done, philanthropically, professionally, socially, I believe has led me to this day. And I think it's just fantastic and exciting. And I was joking. I'm like, now I'm, along with an awesome team, responsible for the health and safety of hundreds of Jewish kids, lives, health and safety and security.
Absolutely.
I'm responsible for millions of dollars that's not mine, the community's money.
That's very true.
Right?
Yep.
And I am responsible to work with the team to help teach and instill strong, prideful Jewish values and Zionistic intent, values. And in a world that isn't so keen right now on Jews and Zionists.
Yeah.
And so, I'm equal to the task, man, and so excited about it and ready for it. I was in Israel for the first time a couple years ago.
Okay.
A year and a half ago for a nephew's bar mitzvah. And my friends back in the day were like, you haven't been to Israel? You haven't been to Israel? You haven't been to Israel? Because I'm just I was a big Herzl Camp guy, and I got involved in the community. And no, I hadn't been. And we went out for the bar mitzvah, and my friends had told me years ago, one in particular, that when you walk off the plane and you're on the ground, it's a feeling that you can't describe. You're home. It's an intangible feeling that just, you're home. And I remember running along the beach in Tel Aviv with my brother, and it was, we were the crack of dawn because we were jet lagged.
Oh, yeah.
And we're on a run, and we're having it, and I'm like, look at all these people. He's like, yeah, and everyone you see is Jewish, can speak Hebrew, and a lot of them know how to handle a gun. And it's just a remarkable experience that is beyond words.
Yeah.
And if I can create that sense of awe and value in another human being, and they can walk around as a proud Jew, we win.
Absolutely.
We win. And that's why now is the time, and that's why it all lines up to today, because I personally want to give that.
Yeah.
And I want to give it to a place that I met my wife there.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that you and
Kim.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, Kim and I met at Herzl Camp.
Okay.
So anyway, that's why now Herzl Camp.
It sounds like you connecting dots a little bit here, and tell me if I'm way off base, please. But it sounds like you feels like you're at a point in your both career as a professional, your life. You mentioned your sobriety and working in the sober community, that you're looking for like a certain, this is going to sound cheesy, purpose almost in what you want to do.
So that's not cheesy at all. It's exactly what I'm doing.
Okay.
I want to do purpose work.
Okay.
I want to do mission-based purpose work. That is that muscle that needs to be exercised. Yeah. I want to leave a legacy, and not the legacy that Tommy Hoffman did something. Yeah. I want to leave the legacy where some kid goes off and becomes a rabbi or a leader at a university or invents some cool thing and has this experience behind them that's woven into their fabric of who they are, the Herzl Camp values. Yeah. That would be really cool. That's legacy, unspoken. Yeah. I want someone, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure someone's going to be rolling their eyes somewhere, but this is 100% genuine and true. I want someone 50 years from now sitting in a room working around something at Herzl Camp and saying, I don't know who made this decision 50 years ago, but man, that was a good one. Yeah. Right? That's legacy. Yeah. And that's what I want to do. That's riding out in the sunset for me. Yeah. It's not the car I drive. It's not the house I live in. It's not the vacations I take.
Right.
And which are, you want to do fun things and have
nice time. We all do. Fun things are fun. Like,
exactly. Don't get me wrong.
No, for sure.
But this brings a level of joy that is this intangible, that is just satisfies the soul. And I wouldn't have been ready for this 5 years ago. I wouldn't have been ready for this 10 years ago. My ego wasn't, none of it. I wouldn't have been ready for it.
Okay.
I'm ready today. And I think that I am a believer in God, and I believe that God just puts things in front of you at the time that you're ready for them. That's it's 100% authentic me going out to the airwaves and the microphones.
Look, I think that's great, and I think that it's good to know. I mean, it's good for a person to know like when they're ready for that opportunity. Because I think you're right. I think there's some opportunities that get presented to us that maybe aren't, that look great, but it's not the right time in our lives or careers or places.
And I think a lot of people try to force it, right? They
for
think
sure.
Something, and that's when you my dad used to have this saying, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, and if he ever listens to this, he'll call me up and say, "You got it wrong." But there's this metaphor of when you're sailing. Mm-hmm. If you're a sailor, you're pulling in the sail to try to go faster, and sometimes letting out the sail is going to get the boat to move faster. Opening it up, releasing the tension, and all of a sudden the boat levels off, and it actually planes better and goes better and flows better. And that's what this is.
I'll take your word for it because I don't sailing metaphors.
But I taught sailing in 1993. Thank you,
that's
Eric
awesome.
and EJ. But that's what it is. It's that if you're trying to force your career too much, right? And I've done that. I've made that mistake 100%. But if you try to force it too much, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. A, for the organization that you're representing. B, for yourself. C, for your future.
Yeah.
And it's not irreparable damage. It's life skills and life abilities and life in retrospect and so forth. But if you do it when you're in the flow, and all of a sudden, because of where I am in my life, and my amazing partner, wife, who supports me, and I support her, and We want the best for each other and for our family. We want to model that for our kids.
Yeah.
Right? This is giving. This is giving. I mean, obviously, I'm being compensated for this giving, but it's
of course
it's a life give. I mean,
right.
we all know that nonprofit leaders, it's a different situation.
No,
right?
absolutely.
But the other thing too, Lonnie, is that, and I learned this during this interview experience. If you don't mind me going off on a little tangent,
please. The
interview experience was there was a lot of interviews. There was a lot of conversations, and someone said to me along the way, like, "Wow, they're giving you a lot of conversations." I said, "Yeah, because they're trying to do the best for the organization, and they want to make sure that the person that they choose is completely or as close to perfectly mission aligned as they can get." So hats off to them for this long and arduous experience, because I then now have more faith in the organization myself. By the way, every conversation I had was more energizing, was more eye-opening. And they'd say, well, you're going to be in for this and this and this. And yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I've dealt with that. I've dealt with phone calls President Temple Israel was an interesting.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Had a couple of phone calls.
I would imagine.
But by the way, that was when Donald Trump had just gotten elected too, and there was all kinds of
I'm sure
social tumult.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Everywhere.
So it was just you deal.
Yeah.
And you know what? We all want the best for our kid.
Yep.
We all want our kid to get what they can get.
Yep.
And you understand that, hey, I've been in those shoes. I've been on that table. I've been on that board. I've been in that role, and I've seen it.
Yeah.
And
this is as good a time as any that you've presented me with the disclosure that I probably should have made earlier. One of the people who was part of the interview process is my wife, Elise, who is the incoming board president of Herzl Camp. So disclosure made. And I was completely in the dark of everything other than the fact that I knew she had a whole lot of meetings around this. There were a lot of Zooms through this experience for her.
A ton. And this is also something that's very, very cool. The board and the leaders on the board, it's the world has changed, right? And we all take it. They take it very seriously.
Yeah.
And it's got so much importance to our community and to our children. The children are our future, right? I mean, that's. And we built Temple Israel's capital campaign. Same thing.
Yep.
The children are our future.
Yeah.
And we got some work to do.
Yeah.
I can go down a political path for a second, and you can feel free to edit this out. But the BDS movement. The BDS movement is the single most, aside from violence and bombings, is a scary threat to the existence of Israel.
Oh, absolutely.
The BDS movement, if you read Noah Tishby's book, Israel, which is my recent Bible, because she's just great. I mean, if I could have dinner with three people right now, it would be Noah Tishby, Barry Weiss, and Kevin Euclid. Like those three people, they've been my heroes for
a group.
I know, but those have been my heroes for like the last 8 weeks, whatever it is. Yeah, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
For different reasons. Anyway, but you talk about the BDS movement and how, if you get the history of it, it's been such a long game. It's a long game.
Oh, for sure it is.
And it started 30 years ago. Well, we've started our long game, but we need to step up our long game. Yeah. And that starts at places like Herzl Camp.
Yeah.
We need to have that. We need to build proud, strong, value-based Zionists and Jews.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do. And pluralistically. If you practice your Judaism different than another person, that's great.
Yeah.
But we're all holding hands at the end of the day. There's this thing about being on a board. When you go into a board meeting, not all boards follow this. I've been on boards that do and then don't. But when, if let's say there's 20 people on the board and a decision comes out and it was, the decision was 18 to 2, when you walk out of those doors, that decision was 20-0, right? Like you get behind it.
Of course. I've been on Senate. I've been on the board of Adath. I know.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's the same thing. Everybody has to be in line.
Right.
And we have that this is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Teaching our kids to be proud Jews is non-negotiable.
Right.
We need to do that. And people have different expectations. We have to meet those people where they're at.
Yeah.
And we have to meet these kids programmatically where they're at so we can do that. They have to have fun.
Yeah.
Camp is fun. Camp is for the campers, and camp is supposed to be fun.
Right.
But can you do it under that lens?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
You absolutely. So you said campus for the campers. You, as people who know you already and people who are just meeting you for the first time in this, half hour or so that we've been recording, you're exuberant. You are outgoing. How do you make yourself...
I'm exhausting for some people. But
I wasn't, not for me, but maybe for some. So, Campus for the Campers, you are very outgoing. How do you sort of model for other counselors how you need to sort of take a step back from maybe your regular persona to let the campers shine through?
Oh, it's all about them,
okay.
Right? So that's a no-brainer.
Okay.
Number one. Number two is, let's look at my role. I'm just starting.
True.
Okay. There's a great staff in place. And I am not going to be the person who walks in and goes, "Here's how." I'm gonna get myself into the tub, right? Let's easy.
Yeah.
Let's ease in.
Yeah.
And let's see how this rolls. Right. And let's see where there's ideas. Obviously, there's going to be things that I'm going to have to react to and be supportive of the team in every way. But there's a great team in place, which is also putting me in a great position.
That's right.
I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah.
I came to this at the right time with the right people. We have visions, not of grandeur, but of grand expectation. Okay? We have some big, grand expectations. And I have every intent of achieving those aspirational goals. Every intent. And that means that it's spreading the mission and living the mission. And that doesn't happen by me walking in and saying, this is the way the cookie crumbles. No. That happens by me saying, okay, where can we optimize? But the team is great.
Yeah.
And I need to, I'm not going to be the bull in the china shop coming and walking in and going, hey, here's how it is. But you're right. I do have a very big personality. I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But I also have a lot of life experience.
Yes, that's true.
And that's why the timing works, I think, because I can come in and say, okay, first seek to understand rather than to be understood. That's how you win. Seek to understand rather than to be understood. And that's how I will start my career or my tenure with the Herzl Camp Association.
So the first time I remember being around you was family camp a long time ago. My oldest is
16 years ago. Maybe 14, 15 years ago.
Yes. My oldest we were in the ramp up to her. I think it was the second year I did family camp with just her in her ramp up to go to Taste. She's a year younger than your oldest.
Yeah, that's about right then.
And you decided rather than, like a normal person hopping in the car with your family, you decided you were going to bike the 100 or so mile. Yeah, I'm going to bring this up because I later found out that you were in training for an Ironman triathlon.
Yes.
And then you told me that, the next day you did a 20 miler on the Gandy Dancer Trail by camp, but that's another. But so that's I know people who've done it. I have friends who have done Ironman. Being in the water like that scares, 2.5 miles scares the hell out of me. I'm not doing that, but that had to have been such a cool experience, right? What is that? How does doing that help you how did that help you, sort of continue to develop and grow into the person you are now?
Well, we can talk about the Ironman experience. Is amazing. I mean,
which one did you do?
Ironman, Wisconsin.
Okay.
In Madison.
Yep.
And what I've learned, what I've learned about my life through Ironman training, I'll bring it back to camp. You want the last day of camp for every camper to be, that was the greatest ever, crying with happiness and joy and can't wait and start counting the days to come back. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't get there by the sign up. You get there through a long process, right? And so same thing with Ironman. When you sign up for the race, you don't get to the finish line. You have about 6 months of training. You have to be very determined and scheduled and diligent about your training. You're not just training for running, biking, and swimming. You're training for how you're going to eat during that day. Mm-hmm. And then the greatest metaphor I have for how triathlons, because I don't do them anymore, but how they played a role in my life is, someone once said to me, it's not a matter of something going wrong on that day, mm-hmm. on race day. It's a matter of how you're going to handle it.
Right.
Right? And that it's a sport metaphor that you live.
Yeah.
And I also, obviously, I was a young athlete in diving. It's, I'm driven that way.
Sure.
And I'm also in sobriety. I mean, you can kind of do the math on my personality type, right? Yeah. But it taught me so much about patience, determination, and persistence. And it was a very, very rewarding experience. And I look back at that. That was 10 years ago now, so 11 years ago. And I look back at that quite longingly. And I've applied so much of it in life skills along the way. So.
But I love that you could tie it back to camp, like without even trying.
It
all ties back to camp. It's amazing.
Well, first of all, everything comes back to Herzl Camp. I got to tell this quick story.
Please.
So the company I was with a few years ago, we kept losing business to a couple of these other clients or a couple of these competitors, and it was so frustrating. And I needed to see what this was all about. So I go on to one of the companies, and I look at the president of the company on LinkedIn, and I've got one mutual connection. And I click on the one mutual connection, and sure enough, I won't give names because I don't think that's appropriate, but it's a Herzl Camp connection.
Okay.
And I call him up, know him well, also an Ironman. That gave something away. And I called him up and said, how well do you know Mark, this owner of this company? And like, do you LinkedIn know him or do you really know him? He's like, no, I ride bike with him. I really know him. I said, I love an introduction. One connection to the one company I wanted to be with. That all came back to Herzl Camp. Think about that.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. And I worked there until they made a decision about some of their business units that they didn't feel were worthy of carrying on, not by the professionals that were running it, but by decisions that were bigger than me.
Yeah, that happens.
How's that?
That happens sometimes. It was very diplomatic.
It was good. That was diplomatic, and you know what? Life gets lifey.
That does happen from time to time. Well, you and I could clearly carry on for quite a while, but we're gonna let you go and continue to sort of. Again, we are recording this before you officially start, so we'll give you the last few hours of relaxation before you get into it. Last couple
However,
questions.
I think my email box is quite full already.
Oh, I have no doubt that it is. We'll let you go check that. But last couple questions we always end on. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
My favorite Jewish holiday? That's a good question. I would say, well, Passover, but Yom Kippur, break the fast. My grandmother, who died many years ago now, my grandmother used to, her tradition at break the fast was, you missed breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so I better serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So breaking the fast when I was a kid, growing up, all the way up until I think my mom even pulled it off until about last year, we started to change stuff up, was you sit down at break fast and you start with breakfast, little break, then you have some lunch, little break, and then you have some dinner. Now, they weren't huge meals, but they were huge meals. And you're eating a lot of food.
You're eating a lot of food.
So I would always look forward to that just because it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And my grandma lovey. Like, it was great.
That's outstanding.
So Passover, just because I think there's just always some, there's a lot of story there and family time, and it's just great. And it's happy, right?
For sure.
It's not Tisha B'Av, right?
No.
So...
and lastly, what is your favorite Jewish food?
Yes.
Okay. Never had that answer before.
I'm a big fan of kugel.
Okay.
Could I, murder a bowl of matzo ball soup? Yes.
Really, any time?
Does the matzo balls have to be a certain consistency to call it a home run? Absolutely. There's a difference there. We could have that conversation.
Sure.
Listen, our ancestors weren't the healthiest eaters,
right?
No. Right? So when I was actively running quite a bit, someone said, is like running in your ancestry? I mean, like, your people are running? Because I was running a lot, obviously doing some training for marathons and stuff. And I said, no, my people ran from the cheese cart to the toilet. Like, that's where they ran. That was their running. Lactose intolerance, but yet we sold cheese.
Yes. No, it's Ashkenazi Jews especially. We did not the healthiest folk.
Healthiest people.
True. Genes are tough there.
Yeah.
Tommy Hoffman, this was a blast. Thank you so much for joining me.
I appreciate it.
Mazel tov on the new job.
I'm excited and pleasantly overwhelmed and excited. Thank you.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.